While watching anime series as they air has been easier than ever thanks to the streaming revolution, when it comes to watching anime movies as they're being premiered, it isn't hard to forget that this is a medium from the other side of the world. Typically, you'll have to wait yonks before you get a proper release in your country, or you'll just have to take drastic measures, by which I mean going outside. As an avid anime fan, I like it when I have to do the latter, since it means that you get to see anime fans in the wild. So with this video, there'll be spoilers for certain films and certain sections, thus there will be timestamps. Now that the formalities are out of the way, I hope you enjoy this collective anthology of Weebs at Films. There's gonna be spoilers. Weebs at Films. I'm so sorry about that. The first anime film I went to see on the big screen was Your Name, except I'm not talking about when it aired in the UK during November 2016. Instead, I'm talking about when I happened to be on holiday in America at the same time it was airing in cinemas over there, April 2017. Since I'd heard great things about the movie, I decided to nip into an AMC cinema to watch it. The movie was rated a PG in America, and thus the adverts were all for films such as The Boss Baby. Although these ads were kind of wasted on this audience since I was 14 and the youngest person at that screening. The other members of the audience being 4 MIT students and a couple who were sitting in the row in front of me. Many people criticise American cinema experiences for people being overly reactive to the movies, but frankly I kind of enjoy it, especially as when the pen dropped out of Tucky's hand I heard an audible "no" from the female half of the couple in front of me. The guy she was with, however, didn't really give as much of a shit. But this got my appetite whet for watching more anime films. So I watched A Silent Voice that summer, at home on Amazon. But it would be a while before I'd actually go to watch another anime film in the cinema, not for a lack of choice. In the autumn of 2017, I was getting ads for a new anime movie that was coming out, which I didn't know much about. So I clicked on the ad and it was saying that the director was apparently behind an episode of Adventure Time. Well, if that's the biggest thing they've done, then I guess there really aren't that big of a name in anime, so I'll not bother, I said to myself. So anyway, this is how I ended up missing out on Masaki Yuasa's Lou Over the Wall. It wasn't until early 2018 when I went to see another anime film in cinemas, albeit that film was Akira since it was being shown as part of its 30th anniversary. And as it turns out, the place I went to see Akira was doing anime screenings quite often, including one for Maquia, When the Promised Flower Blooms, that featured a Q&A with Mari Okada, the director. So I went to that screening, and the cinema was actually pretty packed. I'm willing to say that there were about 100 people in there, and of those 100, I had to be sat in front of the one fella who would say everything as it was happening. For example, "Oh my god, is she pregnant?" or "Oh, they should call the child Maquia." The person they came with would respond with a whispered "I know." Their tone started off as enthusiastic, before moving down to humoured, and then just becoming resigned to it. But this is a really good film, and I'm also glad I saw it when I did, since I got to make a video about it that weekend, making it one of the first English reviews of Maquia on YouTube. I mean, yeah, the video was shit, but frankly that's a given with me. Later that year, I went to see the Mamoru Hosoda film Mirai. Unlike many of the previous films I just talked about, I saw ads for this everywhere, and it was actually being shown at quite a lot of cinemas. So I booked a ticket for a screening on a Sunday and went. It was a cold day, so I put on a large coat. And because it was quite a popular screening I went to, the only seats that were available were at the back. But upon reaching the cinema, I realised something. Maybe this animated film, with a PG rating whose principal character is a 4-year-old child, may have potentially attracted a younger audience. And wouldn't you look at that, the majority of the people who were at this screening were parent and child groups. And so, being the person sitting at the back of the cinema full of kids wearing a trench coat took on a very different connotation. But let's move on to a cinema experience that made me feel like a kid, instead of one where actual kids were present. Promare. I went over what the other people in the audience were like when I made my review of the film, but I didn't mention that I was also really bloody hungry when I got to the cinema, and so I needed something to eat. Since I was using a voucher that I won to buy the tickets, I decided to use the rest of the money I had left on it to buy myself a hot dog. So I put fuckloads of mustard on it and went through into the auditorium. It was then that a realisation came to me. This is an anime film, thus I'd be too busy looking at the subtitles to be able to make sure that I wasn't getting mustard on my clothes. So, as the adverts were just coming to a close, I absolutely scranned the shit out of this hot dog to the extent that I got a bit of a stomach cramp. Well, at least now I can fully concentrate on the subtitles, I thought to myself. It was a dubbed screening. I got indigestion for nothing. But besides that, as I mentioned, the audience all went mental when there was a reference to Gurren Lagann on screen, as did I. And there's also that one guy's girlfriend who got up at the end of the film and said aloud, that movie was just 50% exposition. Which is kind of true, in the same way that my inner reaction to that statement was 50% acknowledgement. The other 50% of that reaction was bafflement, because is that really the only fucking thing you can think of after watching Promare? A week later, Konosuba Legend of Crimson was showing in that same cinema, so I made sure to book 2 days in advance so wondered I wouldn't be turned away at the door. I needn't have bothered since only about a dozen people showed up for the 100-seater auditorium. But it's peace of mind that counts. As I was walking in, I held open the door for a fellow, who proceeded to walk up the stairs on the left side of the cinema. I walked up the stairs on the right side of the cinema to my allocated seat and ended up sitting right next to the person I just held the door open for, despite there being literal hundreds of other places I could have been sitting. But by that point I was already sitting down and it would have made it more awkward if I suddenly moved away. So that was fun. However, the film was a blast, although I was not expecting anyone in the audience to find Komeko as cute as they did. Not that she isn't cute or anything, it's just that this audience would be the last people one would assume to be thinking about having children, since they were all between the ages of 17 to late 20s, entirely male, and had a combined total of sexual experiences you can count on one hand, provided that hand belonged to Ethan from Heavy Rain. But speaking of Rain, I went to see Weathering with You a few months later, although it was on the same day I had exams, so I literally put the pen down, walked out of school, and then launched into a delightful evening of Japanese culture. I'd booked my ticket in advance, and was glad I had, since there was a queue spanning several blocks outside the cinema when I got there. With such a massive audience, one could easily grasp the moments when they reacted. Now, the first major joke of the movie is when someone recommends that Hodaka works in a sex shop. But the first moment the audience laughed was a few seconds before that, because Hodaka was using Yahoo as his main search engine. The moments that generated the loudest reactions were, naturally, the references to Your Name, as upon the jewellery store scene, someone a few rows down from me proclaimed, "Oh my days, is that Mitsuha?" At the end of the movie, I was pretty pleased, and wanted to stay behind to listen to some of the Radwimp songs that were being played over the credits. But I wasn't the only one with that idea, because quite a lot of people didn't leave their seats since they were expecting a post-credit scene. I decided that this would be my chance to maybe talk to some fellow Shinkai fans. But just as I was about to do it, one of them said, "Hey, let me check Reddit to see if there's information on the credits." Sometimes elitism has its benefits. I was intending to make this video last week, since I went to see Demon Slayer, Mugen Train. I'd just binged the series, so that I was able to catch one of the last showings, and when I got to the cinema, I was one of 5 people. Well, 5 plus the one janitor who came in when they were explaining the power system. And from what little I managed to glimpse of his body language, I could tell he was thinking, yep, they're using elemental powers. Fuck's sake, this really is an anime movie. But when Akaza showed up for the final fight, I saw each person in the theatre individually laugh to themselves, because they had thought up some variation of the "lol it's Sukuna from Jujutsu Kaisen" joke. But the reason I didn't make this video last week was because I went to the cinema this week as well. Josee, the Tiger and the Fish is the first film by Studio Bones I have watched, and yes, that means I haven't watched Cowboy Bebop the movie, I'm ashamed too. There were about 7 people who came to the screening I went to, and all of them came on their own. At the end, one person turned to the other and began talking about the film with them, and gradually someone else joined, so I decided, bugger it, and ended up having an almost hours-long conversation with them. It was fun, since one person didn't watch much anime and the rest of them were drowning them in recommendations. I got to talk seasonal anime with some of them, which is something I'm not able to do with many people. I'm really glad I stuck around to have that convo. And I'm also glad I got to watch Josee, the Tiger and the Fish, since it's a great movie. Although there's one point during the film I got a little paranoid. Why? It's because the 4 principal characters were a guy who appears to fall in love with every girl he sees, a main character who's trying to get a scholarship, the old friend with a crush on them, and a character who has trouble moving their legs. After tallying all of that off, I realised something, and it produced a bit of a reaction from me. Namely, I know where this is going, stop the fucking train, I want off the ride, I want off the fucking ride!